Let's get rolling on a Thursday. Glasses in session. We go to the Glasser guest line. Check in with Jamie Plunkett, who joins us at Frog Preacher on X. Covers TCU for Horned Frog Blitz and 24/7 Sports. Jamie, great having you on, man. We're all trying to figure out who's going to win the Big 12 this year because it is maybe as wide open as we've ever seen a conference coming into the preseason. Jamie, I got to tell you, man, the more I read about TCU, the more that I like them, right? The quarterback's coming back. They got an experienced defense. I like the coaching staff with Avalos on defense and Bryles on offense. So heading into the season, what is the question mark that you have about TCU? Because there's a lot I like about this team, but what would be the question mark that you have?
Well, you're right. There is a lot to like. I think the two biggest questions for TCU football heading into 2025 are, can they improve in the running game, which was a real struggle for them in 2024, and can they defend against the run, which was another big struggle. If they can improve a little bit in both of those areas, I think that the sky is the limit for this TCU football team. They brought in Kavorian Barnes from UTSA, who was a good runner in 22 and 23 before having a little bit of a step back in 24, and they shored up the interior of that defensive line with Washington State transfer, Ansel Dinamboo. So they tried to address both of those needs in the offseason. They've looked decent in fall camp, but you really, when it's good on good in the own team, you don't really know what you're getting until week one. So we'll see against North Carolina and Chapel Hill week one if TCU has actually made progress in both of those areas.
I mentioned Josh Hoover's coming back as the QB, Jamie, and he broke the school record last year in passing yards, right? So you're talking about one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the conference, maybe in all of college football. I like Hoover quite a bit. Do you think he's going to have an even better season this year than he did last year, nearly throwing for 4,000 yards?
Well, the potential's certainly there. He gets the ball out really quick. He makes his reads really, really quickly. And we saw what happens when you have a good pass blocking offensive line and capable wide receivers. He can get the ball out and get it around to a couple of different guys. But he lost 3 guys to the NFL, and Savion Williams, Jack Besh, and PJ Richardson. So we've got to see if these other wide receivers can kind of step up and fill in those shoes. Eric McAllister looks like a true number one. You got Jordan Dwyer coming in. He was a 1,000-yard receiver at Idaho last year. Joseph Manjack's a veteran from Houston. But if Josh Hoover wants to make the next step, he's got to get those wide receivers to make the next step as well. He's only 3,800 passing yards away from becoming the third TCU quarterback ever to eclipse that 10,000-yard mark. I think he gets there, but it's going to take some of those wide receivers stepping up and filling in those shoes.
Defensively, Jamie, they return 8 starters on that side of the ball. They're going to have a very good secondary, one of the better ones in the Big 12. How do you expect TCU's defense to look this season?
Well, they bring back a ton of returning production. Bud Clark's been here for a million years, it feels like. Nambi Obiezor is a leader at that linebacker group. And then you've got a stud position, kind of that hybrid D-end linebacker guy in Devin Deal coming back as well. So they've got the veteran talent at all 3 levels. It's year 2 of Andy Avalos' system, and all the guys I've talked to on defense so far this fall camp have said they're much more comfortable in this defensive system than they were a season ago. And we saw that defense take a big step in the second half of 2024 when TCU went on that run to win, I think it was 6 of their last 7 games. So if the defense can get that veteran talent to step up and even maybe take another step in their production this year, I think it's going to be a really good year for TCU's defense.
We're talking TCU here on Send It In with Jamie Plunkett at Frog Preacher on X. Make sure you guys give him a follow there. Jamie, let's talk about the schedule because it's a fascinating one for TCU, and right off the bat, one of the most intriguing games, standalone game on Monday night. Obviously, no Monday night for NFL yet because they get going the following week. So we get a college Monday night game, TCU on the road at North Carolina. Has Sonny Dykes talked about just how challenging it is because we've never seen Belichick at the college level? You can maybe watch some film on what his Patriots teams did, but you really don't know what to expect until you got out there. I'm just curious, has any of the coaches talked about maybe the challenges that come with preparing for Carolina because you don't really know what to expect?
You know, it's interesting. I think Sonny Dykes and TCU staff might be one of the most equipped coaching staffs to handle this because they just went through it a couple of years ago trying to get ready for Colorado when it was Deion Sanders' first game at with the Buffaloes. And so they had to mash up a ton of film there, not just from where coaches have been, but from where players have been too. The approach is similar, I think, but they've scaled it down a little bit for this. They're watching a ton of New England Patriots film, obviously. They're watching a lot of Washington film from last year, the Huskies, where Steve Belichick was the defensive coordinator. And then they're going and they're looking at Gio Lopez when he was at App State last year, what film he has on the or I don't think it was App State. I can't remember where it was, but they're watching quarterback film. Thank you, South Alabama, from when he was there last year. So they're doing a similar approach to what they did for Colorado. Obviously, the Colorado result isn't what they want in Chapel Hill, but they have kind of gone through this process before, and I think that's informing how they're approaching it this time.
What has Sonny Dykes said about the depth of the team this year? Because, as you know, Jamie, a lot of these teams, right, they'll maybe play one Power 4 game in the non-conference, then other games are kind of cupcakes. Not for TCU. They get the UNC game, and then they get SMU, who's going to be one of the better teams in the ACC this year, on top of the Big 12 schedule. Does he feel like the depth is good enough to withstand this tough schedule that they have this year?
He does. He's said a couple of times since the spring he feels like this is the deepest roster he's had at any coaching stop he's been at. Not hard to say that when you've been at Cal and Louisiana Tech, I suppose, and SMU, but TCU has built up a lot of good depth. They didn't lose a ton of bodies in the transfer portal, maybe 5 or 6, and they brought in some really talented depth as well. So he loves the depth, especially at corner and at running back, 2 positions of need for this team in the offseason. They feel like they've addressed those, and he's feeling good about not just the starters, but all 85 on the roster this year.
I mentioned the schedule's not easy, right? You're at UNC, home against SMU. Then you got Baylor, Iowa State at home, road trips to Tempe to take on ASU, K-State, BYU as well. So a lot of difficult games. When you looked at the schedule, what was the game that jumped out at you as the one that maybe you thought was the most important, toughest game to win? What was that game that stuck out to you on the schedule?
I think most important and toughest might be 2 different games this year. Let's start with toughest. TCU never plays well in Manhattan, Kansas. It's always been a struggle going back to those teams that had Trevon Boykin and Josh Doxson and Aaron Green. They could still barely get out of Manhattan, Kansas with a win. So I've kind of got that Kansas State game circled as the toughest, especially when you consider that Kansas State is another one of those teams that's really hoping to get to the Big 12 championship and make the college football playoff this year out of the league. Most important, I'm going to circle Baylor coming to Fort Worth because you lost on a field goal in Waco last year. That's your primary rival. And at that point in the season, if you can get that win over Baylor, you're probably looking at having 6 or 7 wins in your back pocket with 3 to go in the regular season. And that's setting you up really, really nicely to make a run towards the Big 12 championship and the CFP in the next month or 2.
What is your prediction this season, Jamie, record-wise for TCU? Right now, BetMGM odds makers have them about 7 wins, so they're seeing about 7-5 for TCU. What's your prediction for the season?
I think TCU clears that 7 wins mark. It's a tough schedule. They've got a lot of really tough road games this year, but they get SMU and Baylor at home. I think that gives them an advantage. They've got a North Carolina team who's already suffering some injuries in the fall. I think they can get away with that win as well. And then you're talking about just protecting home field in the league. And I think they can get to 8, maybe 9 wins. 9-3 would be a really nice season for TCU. The fan base thinks they can get to 10. I'm not sure I'm quite there with them on that one, but I see them getting over that 7 and winning 8 or 9.
Jamie, before I let you go, I've been asking all the guests who have come on to talk Big 12, who is the team in the conference that they think is going to be maybe the toughest this year or the one that gives their team the toughest challenge? Because, again, this league is so wide open. So I'll ask you in the Big 12, outside of TCU, who's the team in the league this year that you think people are gunning for, that you think is the team to beat?
Look, I think a lot of people are going to say Arizona State. That makes sense because they're the defending champ. But the reality is that the Big 12 hasn't had a back-to-back champion since Oklahoma did it over a decade ago. So I'm going to go with Utah. They had a really bad first year in the league, but they rebuilt that defense. It should be a top 20 defense in the country again. They rebuilt their offensive line, and they went and got Devin Dampier from UNLV, who I really like as a dual-threat quarterback. If he can improve his passing game a little bit and get away from that 1-to-1 touchdown ratio he had last year, we know what he does with his legs, and I think Utah would be the team to beat in the league.
Love it. Great stuff. Jamie Plunkett. Again, give him a follow on X at Frog Preacher. Covers TCU for Horned Frog Blitz and 24/7 Sports. Jamie, appreciate the time, man. Great meeting you. Have an awesome season. Hope to catch up again sometime down the road.
My pleasure, PJ. Go Frogs.